So there's often the complaint that there isn't a lot of funding out there within science anymore. There are actually a huge number of these fellowships available. You just need to know where to look for them and which ones are applicable to you. So a really useful resource that I found was the personal website of Dr. Dieter Lucas, who's a biologist in Leipzig. So his website has a lot of really useful and interesting information on the early career researcher process, including a link to this Excel spreadsheet that I've shown here, where he's tabulated several hundred different fellowships from around the world that you can search in terms of your nationality, the host country, how many years since your PhD, etc., etc. So this is a really useful resource that I used a couple of years ago. What you can also use is this Early Career Research Central, which is essentially the information from that table, slightly updated and put into a more easy to search interface. So again, you can search by country, etc., etc. If you really want to work in India, then you can see from this that there are 4 fellowships available at the time that I took this screenshot. So you just follow these links and you can find the different opportunities that are available to you. So I just wanted to give the 2 case studies of the fellowships that I've applied for in the last couple of years to kind of highlight the similarities and difference between these 2. So the first one was the Banting postdoctoral fellowship. So this is done by the Canadian Research Council, and it is for either Canadians to go abroad or for non-Canadians to go to Canada. So this one has a very lucrative salary. It's certainly higher than the average postdoc in Canada, but there is nothing included for travel or consumables. It is just your salary. So you'll need to talk to your supervisor about then getting money to go to a conference. There are 3 major criteria for this application, all of which are weighted equally in this case. So the first one that will almost always be assessed regardless of the fellowship is obviously the applicant, that's you. So this will include the CV, a list of your publications, for example. In this particular case, you also had to write 3 of your top contributions to research and 3 written contributions of when you showed leadership, either in or outside the lab. For this one, you also needed 3 letters of support from referees, one of which is called arm's length. So someone who has not directly supervised you, so someone you've met at a conference or an international collaborator, or potentially your external examiner from your PhD defense is a common one. The second part is the proposal. So this will take up by far the most amount of time when it comes to writing your application, particularly as it's something you're not likely to have done a lot during your PhD. Certainly when I was writing my Banting application, this was the first time I'd written a proper proposal. So they will all have either page or word limits, and this can either include the references or there'll be a separate section for references. You just need to read the scheme notes and find out what the exact criteria are that you need to follow, because if you don't follow it, then they won't assess you. The other thing, which is really quite a small part of a normal application, but is really quite important, is the lay summary. So this is, as it sounds, a summary of your work to a general audience and not a specialist in your field. So these are often very important because you're going to be examined by multidisciplinary committees, and if they need to be able to understand why your work is important, even if they're not an expert. The final part for the Banting was the host institution, and particularly synergy with the institution, which was the buzzword they used. So this is how the host institution is committed to helping you grow as a researcher, but also how you as a researcher can help the institution and what skills you can bring to them. So just as a vague timeline, so this is actually this year's 2019's timeline. So the deadline is in September. Once you've submitted the application, so it's quite a large application to prepare, but once you've submitted it, there are no further steps until you hear a result, either positive or negative. There's nothing in between. And then you start the fellowship within a few months, or within 8 months, I believe, of hearing the result. What's really important to note for this is that because these are quite competitive, the institutions are only allowed to submit a certain number of applications. So this means that particularly the more popular institutions will have an internal selection procedure to make sure they're only putting forward the best candidates. So this is not a problem as long as you know about it. So for me, although it says a September deadline, when I applied and was putting my application together at the end of May, start of June, I thought I had quite a long time. And then I found out the University of Toronto had an internal deadline at the end of July. So suddenly I had 2 months less time than I thought to prepare my application. So try and find out about this as early as you can. This won't be the This won't be true for all fellowships, but it will certainly be true for some of them. So this is something you want to find out as early as you can. So the second one, which is what I'm on now, is the Veni Fellowship. So this is done by the Dutch research agency, and they have 3 kind of career stages, the Veni Vidi Vici, after Julius Caesar. So this is really kind of a stepping stone between a postdoc and your own independent position. So it is formally an independent fellowship, but the money isn't enough to actually set up your own lab and get your own equipment necessarily. So you'll still be working in someone else's lab. So it's worth 250,000 euros over the 3 years, although this was the first time I found out that just because you've won 250,000 doesn't mean you get that amount. The university ends up getting some of that. And you actually need to write a full budget, so for your salary, but also for consumables and glassware and travel, etc., etc. And that needs to be approved by your host institution. So again, that can take some time if you've never done it before. So again, this was assessed according to 3 criteria. So again, the applicant, there was a bit more of a focus on international activities and teaching in this particular procedure. Interestingly, there were no reference letters at all in this case at any stage of the application, so it was just your application. Again, secondly is the proposal. This time the word limit was 2,000 words or no more than 6 pages. Again, excluding references, and again, there was a very important lay summary to include. In this case, instead of there being synergy with the institution, the third criterion was knowledge utilization. So how will the knowledge that you generate during your project be used and shared during and after the project? So this could be writing publications, it could be getting patents, or if it's very applicable, maybe starting a spin-out. If it's a bit more fundamental, then maybe giving a public seminar, this kind of stuff. But it's a common part of these Dutch proposals.